Hey everybody, Chris Lindsay here, and you're listening to Pitch List. Join us on a deep dive into the heart of what makes writing songs and making music so magical. Let's find out what makes songwriters tick, and along the way, remember why we love music. Welcome to Pitch List. Hey everybody, my name is Chris Lindsay, and wow, this is the 61st episode of Pitch List. Our guest today is a mega hit pop writer and artist with too many iconic number ones to count. To be honest, I'd be out of my mind to be part of just one of the huge songs he's written. His career has spanned all the way from a duo formed in the 70s to his present-day work in Americana, with no sign of slowing down anytime soon. We had a great talk by Zoom on a cloudy Nashville afternoon. This is John Oates, and welcome to Pitch List. Good afternoon. We've got a killer version of Pitch List today. I've been excited all week thinking about talking to this guy. Master, gifted, hit songwriter, John Oates. How are you, man?
Good, man. That's quite an intro, man. I hope I can live up to it.
No, I don't want to fanboy on you, but you kind of already did. I was looking over your stats, 80 million records, best-selling duo ever, including now like killer crazy, the thing you're doing on your own, which is awesome, like an Americana thing. That's a dream career, man. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I've been very blessed and very fortunate to have the amazing commercial success of a Hall and Oates career to allow me to do other things. And I think any creative person, songwriter, musician, whatever, would really dream to have that situation where they can go and do what they want creatively because of this, great success that I've had with Darryl Hall.
Yeah. And it's, that was, that you hit the, one of my first big, cause we're a songwriting podcast, and, all of your artist stuff is driven by your songs. And I mean, you're such a commercial. I mean, you could have got those songs cut by other artists that you had giant hits on. How do you feel like it's just you write naturally what you like and that happened to be commercial? Did you strive to write things to be on the radio? Or is that just kind of this amalgamation of what you grew up with and that's how it came out?
Darryl and I have always done what we do naturally. We have a certain thing that, we have a lot of, there's a lot of commonality in what we like about music and the way we approach music, but there's also a lot of differences in our roots and our background. He came from the church and from an R&B kind of a street corner doo-wop harmony. And he actually has classical training as well. And then I came from a more folky blues, kind of rootsy kind of place. And we really combined those two things. When we first got together, our two styles were so kind of different that they didn't really blend very well. And it took us a while to kind of figure out, he kind of came toward me, I came toward him, and we learned a lot from each other. And eventually it coalesced into this sound. We never tried to write for other people. In fact, I think it's kind of surprising over the years with the amount of songs that we've written and the amount of hits we've had that not more people have covered our songs. It really wasn't until the sampling hip hop era when people started to actually use a lot of our songs. I think it has to do with the way we sing and the style of our chords and the way we impose melodies over those certain chords. So it's just we do what we do, and we never really cared about whether anyone else would record them. It was all about something that we liked and something that felt right to us.
That's so great. We talk about that on this podcast often, about just doing what you love and having that work. Another one thing about this era for you, and then we're going to get off of that, but I was reading the beginning of your book and you said something really interesting, that you guys were not a duo. You're two individuals, and none of your record, I think this is right, it said in there, none of your titles of your albums was ever Hall and Oates. It was both of y'all's name.
That's right.
And the outside world decided you guys were Hall and Oates. That's not how you approached it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just easier to say Hall and Oates for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
But the thing is, no, we actually, it was a conscious decision on our part from the very beginning that we would call it, we would be known as Darryl Hall and John Oates because we were two individuals working together. And I know that seems like we're parsing it kind of finely, you know what I mean, and maybe making a lot about nothing, but it's actually more than nothing for us because we always felt that we were capable of making our own music in any way that we wanted to, but we also knew there was a magic in working together.
Yeah, that's probably just all it comes down to, the chemistry of you guys together. It just worked, and it was just beautiful, and the whole world sang along, man. It still does. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, let's go back. like I said, we deal with songwriting, so I kind of want to get into, and some of the things I know are out there in interviews you've done, but quickly, could we go through some of your early influences to become the songwriter that you are, that you loved? Are there like little high points you could talk to us about?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty extensive because, I'm kind of old and I've had a long career, but nevertheless, I feel like I was very fortunate to be born at a certain time. I was born before rock and roll, and I was old enough and musically sensitive enough that when rock and roll happened, I realized that something new had happened. I was still a little kid, but nevertheless, when I grew up, the first thing I heard was big band music because that was the music of my parents' generation, the World War II generation, and my parents loved all the classic big band stuff. Tommy Dorsey, Lionel Hampton, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, whatever, and that's the music I heard growing up. So there was this kind of I have this swing and big band sensibility in my head. And I wasn't really able to articulate that until years later, actually until just most very recently, really, because it wasn't something I thought about. But nevertheless, as rock and roll started in the early 50s, I turned on to all the early rockers. It was Chuck Berry, Elvis, Little Richard, Fats Domino, and so on and so forth up through the 50s. Jerry Lee Lewis, and then into the 60s when I started listening to a lot of R&B and a lot of roots music and then blues music. Philadelphia, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia had a very rich musical history. It goes back, Billie Holiday, people like Wes Montgomery. And the Philadelphia Folk Festival has been going on for over 50 years. I went to the very first one. And at the same time, the Uptown Theater on North Broad Street was part of the Chitlin Circuit, which was the Apollo in New York, the Howard in D.C., and the Uptown in Philly. And that was the circuit that all the roots and R&B musicians played. So I was born at this incredible, fruitful moment where I could go to the Uptown Theater on Saturday night, and I saw Sam and Dave and Otis Redding and the Temptations and the Miracles, and I saw Stevie Wonder do Fingertips when he was 12 years old.
Wow!
And then I could go to the Philadelphia Folk Festival and see Doc Watson and Mississippi John Hurt and Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee and Gene Ritchie and and so on and so forth. So, being a guitar player, I was absorbing all that stuff. And to me, there wasn't that much difference between the two. It was the essential music of America that was being expressed in slightly different ways. But really, in the final analysis, it was all exactly the same to me. So I think that's been my mantra and my philosophy going forward, is that this is, it's all part of this amazing palette of American music that, that you can draw from. It's been such an important aspect of what America has brought to the world.
Absolutely. Really. And still does. The mix of all those elements is still influences, dominates the world in sound. It's unbelievable. Right. So here's where one way I wanted to go. Now, you moved to Nashville. I remember we started seeing you around here in the early 2000s. Is that when you moved to town?
That's right.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And we would all see you at the awards and everything. And I kind of want to talk about your move to Nashville, your writing style before, and then coming, the Nashville style. And now you do Nashville co-writes, right?
Yeah, I've done many
Yeah,
over the
many.
years.
Yeah.
I made a lot of good friends in the Nashville songwriting community.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear your take on that, coming from the pop rock world that you came from into Nashville and their style of writing and things you like or don't like.
Well, I started coming to Nashville to write in the late '90s.
Mm-hmm.
I was producing a guy named Jerry Lynn Williams in Oklahoma, and Jerry Lynn had a publisher here in Nashville. And in the course of making this record with him, I met his publisher, and this publisher encouraged me to come and write. Darryl and I weren't touring very much at the time in the late '90s, and I wanted to try other things. Had dreams of writing a big country hit that didn't turn out so well for me, but nevertheless,
so far.
so far, that's right. You're always good as your next song, right?
That's right. This could be the year we could see you at BMIs and up on stage.
True. But I did come to Nashville, and I met Keith Follesay. Was one of the first Nashville writers I met. And Keith and I began to write together. And he kind of walked me through the whole Nashville demo process, where you go in the studio and cut 5 or 6 songs in a few hours. And I got to play with some of these amazing studio musicians. And one thing I noticed, because prior to the late '90s coming to Nashville, the only people I played with was Darryl and our various bands. I literally never played with anyone else. So I had a thing that I did with Darryl and with our, we had different bands over the years, but it was always, I had a role that I played in that rhythm section. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I got to Nashville, and I felt like it brought me back to the early days of Philadelphia, when I was going to the Philadelphia Folk Festival and going to the Second Fret, the coffee houses, and seeing all these amazing performers. And I just got very turned on by the quality of the musicianship, the high level of the players and their professionalism. And I said, man, I got to be here. And little by little, we started coming more often, and eventually we got a place here, and, got involved very early on with Jed Hilly and the Americana community. Right. I felt like it was a place where I could find a home, musical home, because it was open-ended. There was lots of styles that could live inside that category of Americana.
Yeah, a lot less rules in Americana.
Yeah.
A lot of even country stuff will spill into Americana if it's a little different. It seems like now things are better than ever. It seems now that people are all over the place and everybody's loving it, and we're losing some of these genre chains that we've had forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone is more open-minded, and the internet and the virtual way of distributing music now has really allowed everyone to be much more open-minded about music and styles and things. I mean, look at contemporary country. I mean, I don't know. It might as well be pop music for all I got.
Exactly, with a steel guitar.
I don't hear any difference, really.
No, well, there isn't. It's just the different instruments, really.
So occasionally there's some different instruments. Sometimes they're not even different instruments.
Yeah. This is true.
But regardless of that fact, it's just about good songs. Yeah. It's about good songs and making good records. And really, I don't care what label you put on it, man. It's just it's all about writing good songs.
Yeah, and it seems like I try to tell my kids this, because they're starting their writing stuff and everything. It doesn't really matter. It's just make it great, and people will come. They'll come listen to it. You just make it great, and and they'll figure out what category to put it in, what to call it, all that. You really have to start from the place of make something great, and then all that gets figured out. Done. You don't have to worry about that. Something caught my eye in maybe your book or some press. You guys are serious guys, man. Somebody had interviewed you and talked about, and this was about the 70s and 80s, where there was a lot of drugs around, right? And you made this comment that you guys were never into that. You didn't have time for that. And that impressed me, because I think sometimes in our business, people think this is, what partying goes along with this business, and I think it's really important for younger writers to know that that's a road to doom, and I love to see people talking about that, about, I don't want to get into just say no to the drugs, kids, but it struck me that you were forceful about it. Do you want to comment on that? I've
been very lucky that I just never needed it. look, who among us has not dabbled in some
Of
way
course.
or another,
Yes.
and of course, growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was everywhere. And
Yep.
and I saw a lot of really talented people fall by the wayside because of drugs and
Yep.
drinking and stuff like that. So my constitution doesn't like it. And so I've rolled with it. And the other thing is even above and beyond all that, Darryl and I always had our eye on the ball. The decisions we made were always predicated on what will allow us to keep making music, not what will allow us to make more money, not what will allow us to make more hits. We thought if we can keep making music, then our lives will be, we'll have good lives, complete lives, because we were both musicians from a very early age. So that was the decisions we made. And, if there was something that would get in the way and be a roadblock to that, like addiction or, just heading off in the wrong direction, then it wasn't something we were very interested in. And we worked too hard. I'm a big fan of being a professional. And that's another thing I love about Nashville, the professionalism across the board. The musicians, the engineers, the producers, the guys the cartage guys who take care of the amplifiers, people who fix instruments. Everybody is super professional, and I love that about Nashville.
Yeah, and that is very well said. I should have approached it from that angle, the professional angle, and well said, because it's a business like any other business, and you have to be serious. And I've had people in my life who were so talented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So talented that just, man.
Yeah.
Sorry about that little dark detour.
It's a reality that we've all gone through.
Yeah.
And if you're in the music business, you're gonna deal with it or come across it or have to overcome it, one or the other.
Yeah. Now, do you have sort of a dual life with your duo and with you by yourself? Or do you swap touring, or how does that work for you?
Well, over the last 4 or 5 years, I was doing double duty. I'd go out with Darryl. We'd do some big tours, play big arenas and big venues. And then I'd come back to Nashville and go out with my good road band. And we'd play clubs and small theaters. And I was doing it back to back. Quite frankly, it wore me out. I loved it so much that I didn't want to stop, but boy, It was tough. I never really stopped. In fact, this year is the first year in my entire professional life where I've been home for a full year. And it was a whole adjustment period.
Really?
Oh yeah. It's kind of funny. I had this symbolic reality hit me because I always keep a bag packed. It's like a thing. I've got this backpack that's got the essentials for what I need. And I could literally grab that bag next to my bed, go to the airport, and I'm gone.
Wow.
And I'm okay.
Your go bag. You got a go bag.
My go bag. And after about 2 or 3 months at home during this COVID thing, I remember the morning I woke up and the reality hit me. I went, you know what? I ain't going nowhere.
Wow.
And I took the bag and I emptied it out. And that was like a cathartic, kind of purging of sorts, So, and then I settled into it. I started writing. I got involved with a lot of projects that I couldn't have gotten involved in had I been on the road. I did a movie, a bunch of 4 or 5 songs for a movie, and things that probably wouldn't have happened had I not been home.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year. So the amount of traveling you do, I can see that. You're just sort of used to that rhythm of being home for a while and then going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I guess that would be an adjustment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Now, when you write, do you do a lot of solo writing, or is it more co-writing, or balance? How do you do that?
It's whatever happens. If we set up a co-write with someone, then I go in there and enjoy the experience and the process. But if I'm home and I come up with an idea, if it's happening, man, I'll take it as far as I can take it. If I run up against a brick wall, I'll always look to someone. Hey, man, check this out. I got this idea. Can't bring it home. What do you got? But at the same time, I just wrote a song just recently for our song festival because I got so inspired by all the great videos and music that the various artists were turning in. I got so inspired. I said, man, I got to write something new. And a good friend of a guy I know in Woody Creek, Colorado, a guy named Joe Henry, not the country Joe Henry. There's another Joe Henry.
Yep.
Who's written songs for John Denver, Frank Sinatra.
I know the name. I know the name. I know who you're talking about.
He's really an author and a poet and a lyricist. He's not actually, he doesn't play any instruments. He and I have lived near each other for 25 years, and we've always used to see each other, but we never got a chance to write. And this past summer, I got together with him, and he said, "Man, I've been waiting to write with you for 25 years." And I said, "Yeah, same with me." And he had this great idea for a song, a title and a concept. And we tried to write it, and it didn't really come together very well. But I liked the idea, and I kind of put it aside. And then just within the last month or so, I wanted to, I thought, man, hey, what about that idea that Joe Henry had? And I went and dug it out of my little files, and I opened it up, and it became a new song. The bones were there, but it became a new song, and I'm really proud of it. It's called Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and it's the last song in our Song Fest that's coming out on March 20th. So, and I went into the studio here in Berry Hill where I would do my work, Addiction Sound, and pulled together some of the guys I play with all the time, and we cut a cool track on it, and really proud of it.
That's awesome. I love the idea too. I think it's so valuable sometimes to just sit things up. Like if you've got a song, I was just working on something today that you like parts of it, but there's one thing that's not working right. It's a great idea. Just sit it up for a couple weeks, walk away, even a month, 2 months. And then when you come back, you'll have a kind of a fresh look at it, and you can often solve the issues. I think it's really good technique. So do you always have songs rolling, or you got lots of songs and different points of going on?
Different parts of my brain all the time.
Okay.
I'm always thinking of stuff, something's always happening, just plunking around. I like to pick up different instruments. Every instrument just seems to speak in a different way. I'll try different tunings on my guitars. That's always inspiring. Or I'll try to noodle around on a keyboard. I'm not much of a piano player, but I can play a little bit. And, or I'll take a dulcimer or, do something, outside the box. And that always brings an idea. And then, it's funny, a lot of times I'll start something in an unusual tuning. And after I get done with it, I realize I could have played it in regular normal tuning, but I might not have thought of it because of that fact.
Yeah. And it also, it knocks you out of the regular groove in your brain. You know what I mean? It puts you in that other. I think that's also another great writing tip. Pick up an instrument you're not familiar with. Do a different tuning, effects, guitar pedals.
That's right.
Anything like that will make it. It's like I used to call them musical marital aids. Because it's just something to jar you loose. To where you just put you in that sort of fresh when you were 18. And it just hits you like magic. We used to do it at our studio when we co-write. I had a big PA that I would fire up, and we'd write songs and just blast it, with loops, like you're at a concert, and it really fired people up, I think that's another great songwriting note.
Yeah. Hey, listen, as far as songwriting goes, there's no rules. Whatever it takes to get you there.
Absolutely right.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more John Oates.
Absolutely right. Well, I want to make sure we talk about this, because I know by the time this airs, I think it'll be close to Saturday, the 20th.
Yes.
And that you're doing Oates Fest, and I want to talk to you about it because it seems really cool. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Absolutely. I can tell you a lot about it.
Awesome.
It started, it started in the early 2000s. When I first came to Nashville, of course, I one of the early things I started doing was doing Songwriters in the Round at the Bluebird and things like that. And just really getting to know a lot of the great songwriters in town and really being impressed with how much talent there was. And, we still had our house in Colorado. We still do. And went back to Colorado, and I thought, the town of Aspen had never seen a Songwriter in the Round type show. So we put together this show that we call the Aspen Songwriters Festival. And we called it 7908 because that's the altitude of Aspen. And we put it together for 3 years and had amazing artists. We had Alan Toussaint, we had Kevin Moe, Matt Nathanson, Donovan Frankenreiter, Shawn Colvin, Jim Lauderdale, just so many people. Anyway, the list goes on. And we had a really great experience doing that, and it kind of fell by the wayside. And then this past summer, we were out there again, and the mayor of the town, who used to be my roadie, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Small world.
Yeah. He and I, we met up, and he said, you should, maybe you want to revive the song festival. And I said, yeah, you think we can do it? He said, yeah, maybe in the spring we could do a live show. And as the year progressed, we realized that wasn't going to happen. And my wife and I said, let's do it virtually. Let's see if we can put a virtual song festival together. And we also, at the same time, we're realizing how this horrible situation in America where 1 in 6 families can't put food on the table. And we were very moved to say, I wish we could do more. And then we said, let's see if we can combine a charity and a donation to help feed America with this song festival idea. And we reached out to FeedingAmerica.org, and they were on board, and great organization. Then it began to take on a life of its own. Reached out to some good friends, and they signed on. And once they signed on, more and more musicians started to sign on, and it really took on a life of its own. And now we have the most amazing lineup of artists. I mean, I can read them off to you if you want, but
tell us some. Tell us some.
Yeah, I mean, I reached out to a lot of the people that were at the Aspen Songwriters Festival: Kevin Moe, Matt Nathanson, Shawn Colvin, Jim Lauderdale. But then, it was Michael McDonald, who Darryl and I toured with, Darius Rucker.
Yeah.
Dave Grohl. And of course, Darryl's doing one of his cool solo songs, I'm in a Philly Mood. I reached out to Dan and Shay, who are two guys who I just love. And I've been watching them and I got to know them over the years because we were on the same label at Warner Nashville, and just love what they've been doing and how big they've gotten in the pop country world. So Dan and Shay signed on. We got Sheila E. She's doing this incredible version of Glamorous Life that's mind-blowing. Wow. As I said, Kev Moe, Shawn Colvin, Sammy Hagar in the Circle, Big Kenny, who's my neighbor, lives right down the road. Sara Bareilles, who all-time favorite, amazing. Bob Weir and Wolf Brothers.
Wow.
Who I got to play with a year and a half ago at the Ryman. Melina Moy, Kevin Cronin, Gavin DeGraw, a great group that lives in Franklin called Lewis York. I don't know if you know these guys.
I don't. I'll have to write that down.
They're new to the Nashville area, but they're incredible. And we have Michael Franti, and Lyle Lovett just actually last week called me up and said, "Hey John, is it too late to get a song on your show?" And I said, "Not for you, man."
That's awesome. I haven't heard.
Yeah, the lineup
that's
is
great.
Phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that is amazing. So how does it, is it going to be, will they be able to Google this and get a link to get in, or do you buy tickets, or how does it work?
Well, here's the cool thing about it. My wife and I wanted to make sure that everyone could enjoy this and hopefully donate. So it's absolutely free. It is not pay-per-view.
Awesome.
It's on nugs.tv or nugs.net, nugs.net or nugs.tv. And we'll have a donation component with a QR code, and we'll have a URL, feedingamerica.org/OatesFest. And all you've got to do on March 20th at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, go on nugs.net and you will see the show. You can sit back and crank the speakers up and enjoy some incredible performances. And at the same time, you can donate to feedingamerica.org. And it's as simple as that. We really wanted to make it all inclusive. Wanted to have a lot of diversity. It's funny, after we organized this thing and we started getting all these amazing videos, I realized that, it's kind of a micro, the song list is kind of, it would be my playlist. It's like all the music I like. There's pop, there's rock, there's R&B, there's Americana, there's folk, there's country, there's blues. So I just, I guess in a way, I've kind of like a moth to the flame. We provided a platform for these artists to not only do something great for Feeding America, but to showcase what they do best, write songs and sing and play.
It's fantastic, man. It's such a great thing, and I'm glad you're doing it. I know, I'm sure you would have rather been in Aspen, but that'll come again. That probably not next year you'll be able to do that.
You know what? I think maybe this virtual festival might actually open the door to doing this type of show in other places. It might be Aspen. It might be, who knows, Chicago, New York, LA. We never know.
Well, and I think it's also so great you're doing it much needed. I read an article that I trusted a couple days ago about food insecurity.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people, a shocking amount of people that are living,
It's hard to believe.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that in America,
Right.
that people are going without food. I that's the thing I couldn't process. And that was really the thing that kicked me in the butt to try to do something.
Yeah.
1 in 6 families can't put food on the table. That's
right.
That's a crazy number. And, just by donating $1 to FeedingAmerica.org, we'll create 10 meals. $1 creates 10 meals. That's pretty good value for the money.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And a lot of those are children, who are going hungry, and there's just, there ain't no call for that in this country. Right. You know what I mean? We need to do something. So we will also put a link for all this in our show notes. So if anybody wants to go straight and donate, that would be amazing. Anything they could do. And also for the show too, because it'll be fantastic. One thing I do want to talk before I let you go, we always talk about this on the podcast. It's one of my favorite things. You may not have this because it looks like you started out and just kind of had a rocket to success, but we love to talk about people's careers in the beginning before they make it. Was there a moment where you really thought, damn, this just isn't going to work, and you might've wanted to give up, or were you always just like, I'm going full blast? I mean, sink or swim. Did you have a moment when you were younger before y'all broke that you worried about it?
Well, I've been fortunate to be able to make a living, really in music my whole life.
Right.
I played in a band from time I was in 6th grade. I taught guitar lessons to get myself through college, and then met Darryl. And Darryl and I had about 2 years where we wrote and we kept trying to play in little venues around Philadelphia, and we weren't getting much traction. It took us quite a while, but we finally got a contract with Atlantic Records, thanks to the fact that Arif Mardin wanted to produce us. One of the world's great producers. So we were very fortunate. And then we made 3 albums and we didn't have any success.
Really? No, I didn't know this.
Sure,
okay, talk about that.
Well, in 1972, we did Whole Oats. In 73, we did A Band of Luncheonette. And in 74, we did War Babies. And they really weren't that successful. We got, it put us on the map, but it didn't really happen. And it wasn't until our 4th album where we went to LA and recorded, and we had Sarah Smile and Rich Girl, and then they re-released She's Gone, and that became a hit as well. So it took about 4 years before we really had the commercial success. And then throughout the 70s, our career was kind of up and down. We had the big hits, and then in the late 70s, we kind of sagged down into this kind of, we weren't having big hits, but we were still working. And then in the 80s, we finally decided to produce ourselves and go into the studio with our road band. And that's what changed everything. And then we had, of course, this, crazy 80s string of hits. But
that's right.
In the end, man, we just wanted to, what I'm most proud of in terms of,
tell us.
Everyone always focuses on our big hits. It's the thing it's kind of the 300-pound gorilla in the room. You can't get away from them, which is great. But not one of our big hits sounds like the other one. Not one. And I'm very proud of that fact. We've never done part 2 of, like Sarah Smile doesn't sound like Rich Girl, doesn't sound like She's Gone. Maneater doesn't sound like You Make My Dreams Come True, or I Can't Go For That, or Out of Touch doesn't sound like, any of those songs. So it's really a testament to the way we wrote, and the fact that we never wanted to, kind of stand on our laurels. We always wanted to push forward.
I love that. And it's true. I hadn't thought of it that way. They are all very unique. And you would think there would be a tendency to sort of stay in a vein. But I also think the fact that you didn't made them even bigger, because they're their own unique little gems. You know what I mean? And it kind of gave them room to shine because they were all different, Well,
yeah, but make no mistake about it. The world at large, meaning radio and big record companies, they wanted us to do Rich Girl too, and they wanted us to do Sarah Smile too. There was no doubt about it, but we wouldn't do it. We wrote the songs we wrote, and we said, here you go, guys. We made the record. Now you go figure out a way of selling it.
Did you guys get in some of those meetings where they're telling you to do a Sarah Smile follow-up, and you're like, well, we're doing what we're doing? And Did it ever get heated? Did you?
Luckily we had a pretty strong manager who kind of isolated us from all that crap. But he knew we weren't going to do it anyway, so it didn't matter.
Well, that's good. There's another tip for you kids. Get a good manager who can bad cop for you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something that came to mind when you were talking. Some of those iconic songs that you're talking about, Maneater, I don't know if you said that one, but that one too. When you had written it, maybe before you recorded it, but it wasn't out. Did you know which ones were going to be giant hits, or were you surprised?
No, we really didn't. We had a sense, we knew certain songs just seemed to rise. We could tell from the recording studio.
Really?
We could tell that when we were in the studio, the tracks just had a certain tracks just, the cream always rises to the top. But I will say that we spent as much time and energy on every album track. We didn't spend more time on a song like You Make My Dreams Come True than we did on one of the other album tracks. It just so happens that song had a magic that, lifted it above the rest of them. But we just, Maneater, I came back from Jamaica and I wanted to write a reggae song, and I wrote the hook, Oh, Here She Comes, as a reggae song.
Wow.
And I was working with Edgar Winter at the time. I was writing with him.
Frankenstein.
And I was with him and I said, hey man, I got this idea. I don't know if you're going to like it. And I played him this reggae version of Maneater, just the hook. And he didn't really, he said, yeah, it's all right. I don't know. I said, okay, well, no problem. And I put it away, and I went back and then I played it for Darryl, and he said, man, I like the idea. He goes, I don't want to do a reggae song. He goes, let's do something more of a Motown feel. Mm-hmm. And he came up with the idea of going bonk, gong, gong, bonk, bonk, ba-da-da-da-da-da.
Yep.
And that became the vibe, the hook, or the instrumental hook. And then we continued to write the song, and we wrote it around that, with that approach, which was much more, rather than reggae, was probably more in keeping with, where we were coming from as a group.
That's crazy. I've heard that type of story before from some big pop songs that were one thing and then another, and then it just, that's the beauty of working together, is like you get that influence someone else. And who knows, if Edgar Winter had worked on that with you, maybe it doesn't do anything,
That's right. Might have been a Texas blues.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, I like to give you a little scoop right here, because
please.
I'm working with a very cool artist named Saxsquatch on the Song Festival. Mm-hmm. He's my co-host, and he's a 7-foot Saxsquatch wearing saxophone player. And he and I have been collaborating, and we did an EDM version of Maneater.
You're kidding.
And it's awesome. And it's going to debut for the first time on the Song Festival on Saturday night.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you speed it up, or how did you do it?
Well, I don't want to give it
we don't want to say
away,
okay.
But all right. It's an electronic dance music version of Maneater. Let's just leave it at that, and let your imagination run wild.
By a 7-foot sax playing Sasquatch.
And me.
And you.
I always end up partnering with the tall people.
You said one, and you tell me when you need to go, but I had another question that came up. Did you guys, so you went out to LA to record, and those were some of the sessions that really started to work for you as far as on the radio?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, going out there, did you move out there too, or did you just record out there?
Well, we sort of temporarily moved out there because we didn't live anywhere in those days. We wrote, we recorded, and we toured. And so when we came off the road, what happened was we had a guy in our band named Christopher Bond. He was from Philadelphia. He was in one of our early bands in the early 70s. And after we did the Abandoned Luncheonette album together, he moved to LA. He didn't want to be on the road. He wanted to be a producer. And we stayed in touch. And over the next year or so, he kept saying, hey, man, I've got the great studios. I've got the great studio musicians. You guys really need to come out here and make a record. And we didn't really want to go to LA. We were not oriented toward LA. But as I said earlier, we did 3 albums in New York, and nothing happened. So we didn't really have anything to lose. So we said, hey, let's take a leap of faith and give this a try. So we went out to LA, and he surrounded us with some of the great LA players. We had Lee Sklar and Ed Green and, Jeff Porcaro and so many amazing players playing on the records. And the studios in LA in the mid 70s were really state of the art. They were some of the best studios in America. So, it was kind of fun to be out there. We'd rent a house, we'd hang, make our record, and then we'd go on tour. And then after the tour's over, we'd go back to LA and rent another house and hang out there, make another record. And, we'd go to the Troubadour and hang out with, with the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt and Jackson Browne and J.D. Souther and those guys. And, we were part of that 70s thing that was happening, but it wasn't what we were doing. We did our own thing, but we were, it was just great to be in a really creative environment.
Yeah, and probably a great change. I grew up in Texas, but I lived out in LA when I was younger for a while. And it's you being an East Coast guy, it's just such a cool change to go somewhere like that if you've never lived there, where everything's different. It's weather's beautiful, it's dry. It just kind of hit me that maybe that was the perfect move for you guys to be out there in a different situation. And then plus you're putting those players, Porcaro, man, that guy was an incredible drummer,
There's so many great players.
To
play with them. I mean, and then along the Red Ledge in 1977, I think it was, we had George Harrison playing on that. He was living out there at the time, and we were hanging out, and I asked him if he would play on our record. And, George was so cool. He said, yeah, he goes, I just want to be in the band. He goes, I don't want to do anything special. I just want to be in the band. I said, hey man, you can do whatever you want. Just show up.
You're George Harrison. You get to do what you want.
He spent the whole day playing acoustic guitar. He played rhythm guitar, and he had a blast, and, so, it was just, it was really a great experience. But by the end, by 77, we had worn out our welcome in LA, and we were anxious to get back to New York, and we were tired. And actually we wanted to start making records with our road band. And that's when we developed the band that we used during the 80s with G.E. Smith, Mickey Curry.
Oh, that's right.
T-Bone Walk. And Charlie DeShant, when we developed that band and we could go in the studio and produce ourselves, that's when everything changed. That's when we had all this tremendous amount of
we'll talk about that. Why did everything change? Do you feel like you had more creative control on the ultimate sound of the record, or
it was a natural evolution of working with, the old paradigm in the record business when you were an artist starting out was you had to be put into the hands of a producer who basically, whether they, guided you musically or not, they were beholden to the record company to make sure you didn't spend too much money and, you're going to have a hit and all, it was the old rules, so to speak. But we were fortunate to work with Arif Mardin. Then we did a record with Todd Rundgren. And then we did 3 records with Christopher Bond. And then we worked with David Foster. And David Foster, we were the first artist that David Foster ever produced.
Wow.
And he was brand new out in LA, and we knew he was an incredible musician, an amazing piano player. And we worked with him for 2 albums. And by the end of the second album that we were working on, he even said to us, he goes, why am I even here? You guys are making this record yourself. And we had evolved to that point where we knew the next step was that we were going to just produce ourselves. So that's really what happened. It was a natural evolution. And we had so much, we had our studio chops down. We had been in the studio for years and years and years. And we were ready to take it over and be responsible for, for our own music.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that has been done before and not worked, but it worked for you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really shot you went into a whole nother level of your career then in the 80s. So
all we needed was a great engineer. And we did. Right. We had great engineers, Neil Kernan, and just so many great engineers.
Right. Besides engineering, I think the producer's main job is just make sure somebody's cutting a hit record,
Well, I learned most of my producing chops from Arif Mardin in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. One of the greatest producers of all times, and one of the great gentlemen in the music business. And I watched what he did in the studio and how he ran his sessions. And to be honest with you, here in Nashville, when I'm producing a track, I run my sessions exactly the way he ran our Atlantic sessions back in the early 70s. He produced his most recent stuff before he passed away was Norah Jones.
Okay. Right. Okay.
He produced Chaka Khan. He produced Aretha Franklin. He produced the first John Prine album. In fact, John Prine and me and Darryl were in the studio at the same time in the same studio. We were doing our second album, and John was doing his first album.
Wow.
So he produced Bette Midler, The Divine Miss M, Bet's first album. He produced Solomon Burke. He produced the Young Rascals. So he was just an amazing. He could do anything, any kind of music. It didn't matter. He treated it as pure music. He didn't care what the style was. And here again, I learned so much from him, and how he handled the studio musicians, how he handpicked the players, picking the right player for the right song at the right moment. And that's a thing that I carry over to Nashville. And I tell people all the time. I think Vince Gill told me that, when you're in Nashville, and you're producing a record, it's like being the director of a movie. Mm-hmm. You cast the players.
Yes.
Yet, because Lord knows there's so many great guitar players, so many great bass players, drummers, whatever. But it's just who's going to be that exact right player for that exact right moment. And that's the luxury that we have here in Nashville to be able to draw from. And I just love the idea. And I come up with a song and I go, oh man, I know exactly who I want on guitar on this one. I know exactly who should be playing bass on this one. And, it's just a beautiful thing to be able to have that talent at your fingertips.
It really is. And I think Nashville is spoiled that way because LA has a good player scene still, but Nashville has the most robust. I mean, there are so many great players here. I mean, so many.
Yeah.
But a great record. I think you're absolutely right, man. Casting is a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because there's guys who can take that. There's 2 or 3 guitar players, more than that could play a record and it's going to work, right?
Sure.
But there's that one person who's just going to be the one little thing.
That's right.
And there's chemistry too. It's not just one. I was talking to my buddy Bukovac about it. It's not just the one person. It's how everybody works together, as a unit, and that chemistry too. I'm going to look into him. I do know who you're talking about now, but I'm going to go back and read. Awesome, man. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I could literally hear these stories forever. And I know I've tried to be respectful. I know you've told these stories a lot, and wanted to keep it on the songwriting lines. Tell us what's, I know you guys are working on Oates Fest, but further out, what are your plans for the next few years?
I just obviously I want to stay active musically, but I want to spread my wings and try some different things. This writing songs for this recent movie called Gringa was really a great experience for me because the songwriting came much easier when I had a script in front of me. Wow. It gave me a starting point. It wasn't like I was trying to come up with a song in a void, kind of coming up with an idea from nothing. I had the script in front of me. It was evocative. The writing was great in the script. And I picked certain, phrases and certain moments out, and it really just spurred my juices, got my juices going. So that was fun. I'd love to do that again. I think there's going to be more song festivals in our future. And Darryl and I have a tour planned for August of this year.
Oh, fantastic.
We got a 25 city tour. We don't know if it's going to happen. We want it to happen, and we're going to do everything in our power to make it happen. I guess the world will dictate to us whether they want to sit in a venue and listen to music live.
And that's, did you say August for that one?
Yeah, early August.
Early August,
25 cities, and we're going to be we're touring with KT Tunstall and Squeeze.
Wow, I hadn't heard that name, and I used to love. I still do. Squeeze,
and they are
incredible band.
We did a couple shows with them, and they sound amazing. And KT Tunstall is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, surely I'm gonna knock wood, but that's seeming more reasonable these days. Knock wood.
Well, right now it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much, John, for being on our podcast.
All right, appreciate it.
I really, I think our listeners are really going to get a kick out of talking to you. So thank you again. This is the great John Oates on Pitch List. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch List, produced in partnership with the American Songwriter Podcast Network. John and his wife Amy have partnered with FeedingAmerica.org to produce Oates Fest 7908. It's scheduled for March 20th, and he's got some amazing guests. To watch, you can find it streaming on Nugs TV. That's it, Nugs TV. Just look it up on the Googles. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast or your preferred listening platform. And if you want, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review. For exclusive content from this week's guest and more, you can visit our website at pitchlistpodcast.com or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. To hear songs written and or recorded by today's guest, check out this week's playlist by finding us on Spotify at Pitch List Podcast. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.